Welcome to Sew with Monty. We're continuing our serger machine series, and today I want to show you how to thread your machine by tying on. So if you've already have your machine threaded with a different color and you want to change color, then this is how you would do it. Now, the first thing you want to pay attention to is your tension, because pulling these threads through your machine, you have to be very careful not to damage your tension. And if you practice being delicate so that you can take care of your tension, that's utmost important. So I've not set mine, I've got it set on 4, no tighter. You can even go up a little bit. So you want to make sure if you had it set in a particular order right here prior to this, you want to write that down or take a picture of it so that you can take it back to the correct setting. I'm actually going to go to 3 because I want it as loose in the range as I can get it so that I don't damage my tension. The next thing I've done is I've clipped my threads away from my spool. So I'm going to remove the color I was using, like this. And I'm going to replace it with the new color that I want to use. So I'm going to set them all up here. Now I'm going to zoom in just a tiny bit because I want to show you this particular tie. So when you tie on a thread, let's go this way, you want to take your thread and the thread off of your spool and tie a slip knot, just like this. And once you have it tied, open it up and make sure it's good and snug. Then trim the tail of the knot down to approximately 1 inch. So you're going to have a tie that looks like this. And then go to the next one and you keep doing this until you get all 4 tied on. So once you have them all tied on and the knots are secure and you have your tails trimmed to 1 inch, it's time to start pulling them through. So let me zoom back out so you can see the entire machine. I'm going to lower it a little bit here. So when we do this, we want to open the front door here to our lower loopers, our upper and lower loopers. That's the first thing. And then I want to make sure that my thread is chained off here. See the chain right here at the bottom? And the next thing I'm going to do is, turn this on just for a second so you can see. I'm going to clip my needle threads because this chain will not pull through if the needle threads are engaged. So you need to clip them first. Now you're going to pull the upper and lower looper simultaneously. So I'm just gently going to pull on this chain, and you can see the threads are going to come down through here. When they approach the tension, the knot approaches that tension, I want to just gently use my hand to ease them through there. If this is getting stopped and it won't go, then you need to release your tension a little bit more and let them pull through gently. Once you have them through, just watch that they go through the entire process until on this side you see the blue. You get 3 or 4 inches of blue, then you can simply trim your thread. That's that simple. Then we're going to do the needles. So you're going to gently pull them down the same way. Make sure they come through the tension gently. The secret is loosen your tension up to about 3 to 4, no more. And that way it'll pull through there gently without spraining the tension springs. Now, once you have the 2 needle threads through here, you want to pull on them to see which one's the inside and the outside needle. This is the inside. It's very important that you thread the inside cone to the inside needle so that they do not get crossed in here and break. Now I'm going to lower my pressure foot, get the upper looper out of the way, and then I'm just going to thread this this inside needle. So needle gets threaded here. Tweezers are very good to have around. If you haven't gotten your tweezers yet for your machine, or you don't have them, you definitely want to get a pair. And then I'm going to go through the wire again and thread the outside needle the same way. And then, after my needles are threaded, with my pressure foot down, most important that you have your pressure foot down, I'm going to close the door, and I'm going to simply chain to make sure that none of my threads are crossing over each other and breaking. So I'm going to lift up my pressure foot just for a second so I get all my threads underneath it and they're not caught up on anything like the throat plate or anywhere else. So I can feel them, that they're coming through there. And then I just start chaining. And so you can see the chain here. That means it's good to go. So now we're ready to start sewing. So in the last video, we were using both needles, 4 threads, to use the tension, to set our tension. And we started with 4. And I do believe for my tension, I ended up with 4.5, almost 5 on my 2 loopers, and 4 and 4 here. And what you want to do is always keep little notes like this. When you do something you like, just put the tension notes in there and just throw them in a baggie or something so you know what you did, because that's very handy later when you want to recreate that stitch. So anyway, what we're going to do, I'm going to take, I've cut up little squares of an old t-shirt here. Actually, mine's not old, it's an underwear shirt out of a 3-pack t-shirts, but I'm using it as my example so that I can get my stitch tension right and know what I did. The first thing we're going to do today is we're going to play with the stitch width. So I'm going to take my stitch width down to the recommended 5. And I'm just going to gently fold over the outside edge of this little sample. And I'm going to sew with my 5 stitch width. And I'm just going to play with my stitch widths for a while, just to get an idea of what they do. So this is a 5mm stitch width, and it's very nice. It could be used a lot for trimming off edges, you know, making a clean edge on a seam. Now I'm going to fold it over, again, about 1 inch away. And this time I'm going to come up to my 6th setting. And this is my next one in line. Your machine may have more settings. And I'm just going to sew right along here. Note that I'm barely cutting off this folded edge. So I'm cutting off about a 16th on the double, about an 1/8 total. Just a little bit there. So this would be my number 6mm setting. So let's go ahead and do one more here. So this is my next one in line, which is, let's get this out of the way so it doesn't get tangled. And when I put my fabric in, you can either book it to the edge of this plate right here and let it go forward like that, or you can take it in next to the blade and just gradually come into the cut. So either way that works for you. If you want to start here, you can. If you need to be a little deeper underneath the foot, that's totally fine too. Now this is my widest setting, which is 7. So I'm going to go up in there a little bit. Sometimes depending on the fabric, it's better to get a little closer. But this is number 7. Again, taking off just a little bit of fabric. You don't want to use this to trim and make your fabric different. Now here's my 3 widths. I'm going to open this up so you can see my options. So if I'm sewing here, I have 5, 6, and 7. Let's get them flat so you can see them. See, there's 5, 6, and 7. Now for trimming an edge or just casting off an edge so it doesn't ravel, I'd probably use 5. If I were making a seam, like in a knit yoga pant, I'd use 6 or 7. There's very little difference between 6 and 7, but I would probably use one of these 2 for an actual seam, so I have a little bit more seam allowance. But these are your stitch widths. Now the next thing I want to do, I want to show you your stitch lengths. So let's get a new sample. And this time we're going to fold over the edge, and I'm going to set it at the largest stitch length it'll go, which is a 4. This is my machine. Now your machine may be a little different. And it's a good idea, after you do these, mark them. Like I can mark my stitch length up here and then put 5, 6, and 7. So I know what they look like. Again, put them in a little baggie or a little box of some sort so that you can refer to them as you're using your machine. So here we go. We're going to go on the longest length now. And we're on the longest length, plus we're on the longest width. So that too might be something you want to consider. So this is the largest stitch that my machine will make, the longest length and the largest width. This would be great for setting elastic. Reason being, you don't want your needle to go into your elastic too frequently, because it can break down the integrity of the elastic, and then it won't work as good. It'll stretch it out and it won't let it bounce back. So this is great for setting elastic. Again, it'd be good for maybe a thicker fabric finishing the edge. So it has a lot of multiple uses, this larger open stitch. Now, I'm going to fold it one more time. I'm going to keep it on the larger width so we can see the stitch. But I'm going to go back to the setting of 3, which is the one that's most popular and recommended by your machine. It's the one that's in the little black box that says this is the one you should use mostly. This might be good for a seam. Like if I were making yoga pants, this would be a great one for a seam. Because as you can see, the stitch is closer together, so that when I use it as a seam, it's going to be more secure than this open stitch would be. See how much more open this one is? So this one might be a little bit more secure. So let's go down a little bit closer. Let's go all the way down to a 2. Now this one's going to be very close together. And now you can see the difference here. There's quite a bit of difference between the 3 and the 2. See how close that is together? Now, what I would suggest you do is take an extra sample and play with it. Play with the stitches and the width and the lengths and do different variations. For instance, I'm on this 2, so maybe I'll take this down to a 5 stitch width. So a 2 length and a 5 width, and just see what it does. And then mark them accordingly. Mark them accordingly, and that way put them in your little baggie or your little box, wherever you're keeping these. And then if you need to know what something looks like, you don't have to do this all over again. You can go, oh yeah, I remember setting on 2 length and a 5 width, this is what I'm going to get. I've also, if you notice, been folding mine because it gives it a more accurate feel for what the stitch is going to look like. Most times, unless you're just casting the edge off, you're using double layer fabric. So that gives me a better idea what the stitches look like. So in this exercise, play with your stitch length, play with your stitch width, and make some samples. You should have 1 sample of all your lengths, 1 sample of your widths, and then a 3rd one with a variation of width and length combined. And then we'll move on. I've got some really fabulous new things to teach you using these stitches. So play with that, and I'll see you in the next video. So we've had fun playing with their stitch widths and lengths. So I've got mine marked here. So now I keep these little guys, these little samples, and I put them in a little sandwich baggie, put them in my drawer or my extra box that I have for my serger. And then if I need to refer to something, I don't have to keep making samples every time. I can go in there and go, oh, that's what those 2 look like. So here is my stitch length with the width of 7. So I could see it very well, what the stitch width, I'm sorry, and with the length of 7. And, no, I'm sorry, that's a stitch length with the width of 7. And then this one is my stitch width with the length of 3, so that I could see the width. So narrower, a little bit wider, and the widest. This last one I did is a variation. I've used different lengths and widths and combined them. So this is length 3, width 5, length 4, width 7, length 2, width 5, length 3, width 7. So I kind of get an idea what each of them look like.